Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we're the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. Given the extreme weather we're having, Ben, I think, just for one time only, we should reinstate paranormal weather. Hot enough for a dragon's barbecue, I would say.
A Devil's Chili Festival.
Oh, that's a good one, yes.
Honestly, This is not the sort of weather for, well, I was going to say for podcasting, it's not the sort of weather for anything. I've shaved the dog. I mean, I didn't do it. I took him to a professional. As not a euphemism either.
Yeah, no, it sounded like one.
He did.
Oh, I've shaved the dog. Oh, no.
You know that Billy Connolly routine where he talks about the lounge singers and he doesn't know what they're saying? Shave the dog. Yeah, it's a bit like that. But everything is too hot for anything, and we live in Britain where there aren't any air conditioners unless you work in a commercial premises.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day. He said, I'm going to the Caribbean in a couple of days. And I went, oh, it's going to be hot there. And they went, yeah, but I'll have an air-conditioned room. And
yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's bad for the planet, but just sitting in the car with the air conditioning on, it's just really nice. And, you know, my car it was built just before the tickover, so you know there was a point when they made it illegal to put the really strong air conditioning stuff in, like the stuff that completely kills polar bears. Right. So mine has got the air conditioning. You get little bits of frost on the vents when it's on. It's very nice.
Nice. I'm going to have to come and sit in your car.
I know. Rachel's one, which is newer, so you have to run it for 10 minutes and then it's sort of, I suppose I'll give you a little bit of a cold breath. Yeah. But, like, I think I maybe had a premonition about this because the episode I want to talk about today is Mars.
Before you get into that, though,
oh, yes.
I just want to mention...
Oh, of course.
We got a couple of new Patreons.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, so Donna and...
Sheila,
that was it. I thought it was Sheila, and then I just had a little pause there. No, Donna and Sheila, thank you so much for joining as Mechanics Assistant on our Patreon account, patreon.com/TQM pod. Really appreciate it, and all the patrons there who are helping us support the podcast by books, materials, do our road trips. You get the podcasts early access to the podcast, and our exclusive Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop episode as well, plus chat, lovely community.
Ad-free,
so come and join us if you fancy it. Well, we'll do the cliche, less than a cup of coffee a month.
It is less than a cup of coffee a month.
What, depending on where you buy your coffee, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Although I've started going into London a little bit more now. Do you know I got charged an extra 50p for decaffeinated the other day?
That doesn't seem right.
I know.
I was in a place the other day and I ordered a sandwich and they said, do you want it toasted? I said, oh, yeah, maybe. And they went, that's an extra 50p. That's all right. I won't have it toasted.
Yeah, fine. If we have to get onto the episode because last week we spent far too long talking about Pan's people, but I just have to say, for all of the people in America, you won't remember this, I don't think, but everyone in the UK, maybe you will. Years ago, there was a sandwich trialled. It was called a bumwich. I'm not even joking. And the idea was that you made it delicious to eat by warming it, by sitting on it while you were driving the car. And it didn't go down well.
Didn't really take off.
No.
I'm not surprised.
I saw it once. Anyway.
Oh, I'd love to have been at that pitch meeting. Anyway, let's move on. Mars.
Let's move on to paranormal
Take me
things.
to Mars.
Okay, so I think it's probably pretty well known that Mars wasn't always a dusty desert.
Yeah.
It's got geological evidence. There's riverbeds, there's clay layers, and there's something called blueberries, which you may or may not have heard of. These are hematite spheres. And they were formed in liquid water. And that does suggest that Mars was wet, warm, billions of years ago.
Had an atmosphere.
It had an atmosphere. I love a planet with a lovely atmosphere. Yeah. And even rainstorms definitely happen there because some of the idea about potential evolution on Mars, they're looking for evidence of basically microbes that might have been distributed across the surface in rainstorms. That's something that CNN reported on in 2019, I found. And recent rover data, such as the Curiosity vehicle, detected methane spikes and indeed organic molecules in a place called Gale Crater. That's quite pleasingly named.
Do lovely coffee there.
Yes. Very expensive. Potential biosignatures were found there, although they could be geological, but microfossils in meteorites have also been found. But again, it's controversial because a lot of mainstream scientists say, look, this could be terrestrial contamination or non-biological structures. It's really hard to know with some of these things. And as ever, the conversation goes on. But in amongst all of this, there's a chap called John Brandenburg, who is a professor, no less, and he's at Harvard, so he does come with good credentials. And he wrote a paper which absolutely caught my eye, although I imagine it might make you slightly cross, because it's called The Fermi Paradox and Evidence for Catastrophe on Mars. And we know from your episode that the Fermi Paradox isn't exactly what we think it is.
Yeah.
But if you take it to mean what he says it does, or what I guess the general accepted version of it is, if the universe is full of planets and ingredients for life, why haven't we found any evidence of other civilizations? And one of the potential ideas is the Great Filter, which is becoming more and more, I guess, prevalent in our minds at the moment, because the Great Filter says for all of those civilizations at some point in their technological advancement, they developed AI like we have just done.
Right.
And they didn't survive the AI challenge.
Right.
And
They destroyed themselves in a way by their own creation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. There was some sort of Terminator-y type thing that happened, or basically their life was surpassed by an AI and it killed them. That's one of the ideas.
I don't want to drive anymore.
Why do you cry? Stop. But this person, this professor, he points in a different direction. He says that there is new evidence from Mars that there was indeed 2 massive thermonuclear explosions millions of years ago. Now, why does he think that? The Martian atmosphere has got an unusual concentration of certain isotopes which only appear in a nuclear reaction, right? So I'm not going to go into the full names of them, but if you just know that Xenon 129 and Krypton 80 are 2 of the main characters that are featuring here.
And he's saying that's not possible as a natural process, or?
Well, they are and they're not. We'll come on to.
Riddle me this. You sounded like a Cassiopeian.
Yeah, yes.
They are, but they're not.
They are, but they're not. But there's also an excess of radioactive elements like uranium and thorium compared to Martian meteorites on the surface. So this gives us a bit of a clue that something unexpected and potentially artificial happened here. And he says the only way to explain it is these 2 massive thermonuclear explosions, because the types of isotopes found in the atmosphere match those produced by open-air nuclear weapons testing on Earth. It indicates something called fast neutron fission rather than nuclear reactor activity. Now, that's important because... So I did an episode about 2 years ago talking about there is a natural nuclear reactor on Earth that has been going for about 50 million years.
Right.
But that doesn't produce the same kind of reactions that a nuclear bomb produces. It produces some of the artifacts that you see around, but it doesn't. It wouldn't explain the things that come from fast neutron fission, is what he's saying.
Right.
He's also calculated that the energy released from these 2 potential explosions is about the equivalent of 10 billion megatons of TNT. So that is comparable to the impact event that wiped out the dinosaurs. Wow. And it would have created a global catastrophe and potentially taken away their atmosphere. Exactly what happened with the dinosaur explosion.
Right, which could explain quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So these explosions were centered in 2 specific northern plain regions. There's one called the Mare Acidilium. That is near Cydonia Mensa. Now, do you remember the name Cydonia Mensa? The face on Mars.
And the pyramid. The face is supposed to be by the pyramid, right?
Yes. Yes, and we'll come on to that because there's a further riddle around that. And it's also near a place called Galaxia's Chaos, which is pleasingly named, but doesn't pay any other large part in our story apart from
but
being able to
call it. But
it's a great
name
that.
that I'm glad you've said.
Yes, exactly. But he also points out that these are places where potential archaeological or possible archaeological artifacts have been identified, and the absence of impact craters suggests these explosions occurred above the surface. Now, that is also important because there are some people who might argue against this by saying that it could have been an impact, a collision with a space object, like a meteorite, something natural.
Right.
That's what released the energy. The other trace materials must come from somewhere else. Start building the picture around that.
And I was thinking, because you have those examples, the very famous one, don't you, where actually it didn't hit the ground, it exploded before it hit the ground.
Yes, that's right. And modern nuclear weapons explode before they hit the ground. That's how they work. They explode in the air. When you combine it with that, what he also says is, look, he's not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but he says not just the face on Mars, but there are other what look like eroded artificial structures in that particular area. And though he points out that there are some elements that look like brickwork that have been observed, he doesn't use that as the basis of his entire argument. Now, I don't think I can tell you about the Xenon-129 and Argon-40 ratios with any great authority. So I want to just play you this video, and this will give you a little... It's just a few seconds long, and this is just what somebody else has to say about it.
There's a deviation from the norm of the isotopic signature of Xenon-129 at our thermonuclear test sites on Earth. And we find the same thing at Cydonia on Mars.
Why is it different on nuclear test sites?
There's something happens when, and it has to be not an atomic bomb, but a thermonuclear bomb. When a thermonuclear bomb is detonated, that leaves a trace of Xenon-129 in that area, which is not the normal, basically, distribution of that isotope that you would find, on Earth or on any of the other rocky bodies in the solar system.
Okay.
And according to Brandenburg, it's a very distinct signature. It's unmistakable, and it's very specifically associated with thermonuclear weapons detonation. Then, after, he discussed this with one of the scientists at Sandia Labs, whose expertise is working on nuclear weapons, he checked for other isotopes, and he saw that the isotopes of the isotopic ratio of thorium and uranium was also off at Cydonia in a way that matched thermonuclear test sites. And so he came to the conclusion that, and even did the math, like how many nukes would you have had to detonate in this place to produce this kind of a deviation? Turns out that an Empire State Building's worth of our highest yield thermonuclear warheads would have had to have been detonated there to produce this kind of isotopic signature.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Well, according to them, this doesn't feel like a natural occurrence. It has to be, I was going to say, man-made, Mars-made, Martian-made.
Mars-made, that's right.
Yeah.
So I'd lost it in my notes earlier. The place that I was talking about earlier was the Oklo reactor. Right. Which is Earth's natural reactor, yeah. And like when we were talking about that, we were talking about a potential for a nuclear explosion to have happened on Earth in previous times, indicating that there was another civilization here before our own.
Right.
But that isn't what he's saying here. He's just saying that there is definite evidence that something wiped out the civilization on Mars.
Now, it's interesting you say wiped out the civilization, because I was thinking, let's go with it, right? There were these nuclear explosions on Mars. They could have been an alien race testing their nukes on a abandoned planet, couldn't they?
They could, although... Why would they do that to a planet which seemed to be alive at that time? Seemed to at least have the potential to have life, even if it didn't have life.
Well, maybe, I'm really just going with it, maybe because it was close enough to their home environment to give them an idea of how these nuclear weapons might perform.
Yes, you could be right. You could be right, and we can't sort of determine what backwards engineer what their.
Either way, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Either way, you're saying it's not a natural, unlikely. Let's hedge our bets a bit. Unlikely to be a natural process, which means it was either a Martian explosion, which did a huge amount of damage and potentially wiped out their civilization, or it could be an alien race coming there and testing nuclear weapons or whatever it was on the planet's surface. Either way, it's extraterrestrial. Isn't it?
Yeah, or it was some bad guys who came and wiped out
a war.
It was, or there wasn't even a war. They just came and wiped them out, and this is definitely a concern amongst people who've been sort of commenting on this this piece that he wrote, because the implication is, or maybe there's a group of extraterrestrials that go around eliminating every other race that gets too technologically advanced.
Yeah.
And there was a brilliant headline in The Sun this week saying Heathrow Airport may be acting as a beacon to extraterrestrials. Now, I'm not saying that, but there is a little bit of a fear that if they just decide to descend, and unlike Independence Day, they don't just do what they did there, they just go, right, let's just nuke them, then it could be bad.
I just got a vision of Zorgon and a couple of other aliens going, well, they've lost our luggage again.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But there's a backdrop to this, and it is impossible to avoid the face on Mars. That was the reason I highlighted it, because it's a terrible coincidence. It's a terribly unlikely coincidence, it seems, that this is where a nuclear reaction may have taken place, and there appears to be something built there. And I didn't realise that there is actually quite a lot of controversy about this face, and it's more than you think, because when you think about the face on Mars, you are going to tell me, oh yeah, basically it was an original photograph that was enhanced, and then when you really look at it, it's just a hill and it's a shadow and the sun was in the right place.
Or pareidolia.
Well.
But, sorry, before you get on to the well, I am right in thinking the face on Mars is by the structure that's known as the pyramid on Mars, which again would kind of tie into this theory, wouldn't it? Of, because again, it's slightly misshapen, it's not a perfect pyramid, all that kind of stuff. Makes sense if it's been involved in a nuclear explosion. It's a weird segue, but I visited Hiroshima and went to Ground Zero there. They've got an incredible museum there, very, very moving experience. And when you see the photos that are in the museum,
is that where the observatory is?
Yeah. And Ground Zero, it looks like a building that's been in a bad fire rather than destroyed. But that was Ground Zero. Everything out from there was absolutely flattened. But this base thing, so you could put forward an argument that the face on Mars, the pyramid, they wouldn't have been completely destroyed if they were at Ground Zero of a nuclear explosion. Yes,
yeah. I mean, because these are very big structures.
Yeah.
I mean, the potential human face there is 1.5 miles long.
Oh, really?
This is not small. Because when you sort of experience the images that you see in the press or online, you got no context. And I was thinking that it was like the size of the Sphinx or something like this, but that's because that's our only earthly reference. No, they're huge. But there is something that doesn't smell right about it. So let's just go back, because I'm not sure. I didn't know what the story of that photograph was either, and you have to know the story to understand why people think it is a bit fishy. So the photograph was taken July 25th, 1976 by Viking 1. And basically, it takes low-resolution camera images as it's flying over the surface. And the data is being back millions of miles back to Earth, and it has to be low-resolution to be able to compress it and get it back with that 1970s technology. That's just one of the reasons for it. And the people at the Jet Propulsion Lab go through the raw images, and they look for interesting features for the public outreach, because it is important to keep people on board because they want their funding, right? And not only are they looking out for potential interesting things, but they're also touching these images up. And I didn't realise that. So for years, up until quite recently, official pictures from Mars had got an orange filter on them because people expect to see an orange landscape, but it has a blue sky and a grey has a grey surface. But this photograph for them, it did stand out. It was 1.5 miles long, as I said. It looks like it has a human face. There's a forehead and there's nose, there's eyes and a mouth. And in that original press release, these are the words they use. They say, this is a trick of light and shadow. There appears to be a face-like structure, but it's just a natural landform. So they laugh it off. And like, what else are they supposed to do? But there is no evidence, right? I just want to make this very, very clear. Neither side has any evidence at the moment in this point in the story.
Right.
If you just say, oh, obviously it's just a natural thing, you're just using your as much prejudice as anybody who says, no, I think that might be a real ancient civilization that's left something there. Both sides are at fault here, I think.
Right.
But it's at this point where Richard Hoagland walks in. You've probably all read a Richard Hoagland book. But I didn't know how involved he was in this story, even like, because I haven't read this particular the book that he's written about this, but I hadn't realised. I just knew that he was a general sort of agent provocateur in the space. But he was a former science advisor to CBS during the Apollo missions, and that's how he sort of became involved in being an independent researcher. But when he saw the image, he said he didn't think this was just as he put it at the time, a quirky Martian coincidence. He thought it was, again in his words, a cosmic calling card. And in the 80s and 90s, he began to weave together what we sort of would think of as the conspiracy theory. So he started to put together the argumentation to say it's not a natural phenomena. It's a remnant of a long-lost civilization built by intelligent beings many, many, many eons ago, and possibly linked to an ancient civilization on Earth. And around that face in the Cydonia region, as you correctly point out, there are pyramids and a fortress-like structure. And they have precise geometric alignments. Right. Hoagland and the team, dubbed the Mars mission, used the Viking images to argue that these formations had mathematical relationships pointing to a hyper-advanced intelligence. He coined terms like tetrahedral geometry and hyperdimensional physics, which gives this whole thing a little bit more of a Buck Rogers type of feel. And this is what I don't think he really did himself any favours here.
Did he do that to give it scientific credibility? Because it sounds like a thing.
No, I think he did it to point out the... So I did pick up the book. It's called The Monuments on Mars, A City on the Edge Forever, from 1987. And what he did was try to point out, using his own language, that if you can obfuscate the truth from either side, he's not trying to obfuscate the truth. He's just saying you can get lost in language, and you can get lost in what NASA is saying. But then what becomes really strange, and this is part of the story that I was unfamiliar with, was for decades NASA didn't release clearer images of the Cydonia region. Right. They also didn't. They were reluctant to send another probe there and photograph the same landscape. It was only pressure from the public that put them in the position where they went to do it again. So whilst other parts of Mars were being imaged in better and better detail, the face and its surroundings were conspicuously not re-photographed. Right. So that's when Hoagland and the supporters cried foul and said, why are you not pointing better cameras at it? Why are you deliberately avoiding looking in this area? And he suggests that there's a cover-up. He suggests that elements within NASA or the US government already knew the truth and feared like a societal upheaval maybe, or a problem with funding. But it gets even stranger when the NASA agree to go and take a photograph of it and then put it out unedited, as it were. The first the first image that we get out of it, you've probably seen it. It looks like, I don't know, a hill on Mars, but it's scratchy, it's grainy, it's almost looking through fog, It's in black and white. You can see that it's roughly the same area, but it is deliberately lower quality.
Right.
And what had happened was that they had taken a high resolution image of it, and they had used their own stenographers and made it lower quality and then put it out there. And when NASA was challenged at a press conference to bring out the original untouched image, they said, yes, of course, it'll be released in due course with all the others. And then when that batch of photographs was released, it was absent. It was taken out of the records. There does not exist today an official high-resolution, untouched up picture of that part of Mars in the NASA archives. They are all missing. They just say, oh, it's so unimportant and so uninteresting to us that we never bother doing it. And that original picture, oh, what a laugh we had that day in 1976.
Right.
So we've got caught up in this, argument of pareidolia, which is obviously the ability of our brain to make sense and put mouths and eyes onto things which aren't really there. But it does lend credibility to other sort of, I guess, crazy ideas about ancient civilizations. So if we assume that Mars did have a civilization and it was destroyed, and maybe some of the survivors from there escaped and resettled on Earth, or maybe it was a little bit more biological than that. And I've actually got a brilliant little paper with some fun facts about consciousness being delivered on a asteroid to talk about in the Extra Scoop today. It was kind of too much of an aside to this story. But what isn't an aside is people who are now, I guess, putting their fingers into the hot pie of perhaps a global earth-bound civilization, or rather Earth-centered civilization, has also existed. Right. There's a video called Proof a Mysterious Lost Ancient Global Civilization Spanned Virtually the Entire Planet, was released by a guy called Jimmy a couple of weeks ago. I dived into this and pulled in some of the evidence and some of the papers that he was talking about. And it's quite interesting, and it fits really neatly into the face on Mars theory and the nukes on there. So what he is telling in that video is that we've been taught about ancient history is real, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a long lost global civilization that's covered about the entire planet, and there's a whole bunch of photos to back it up. So the pyramids, which aren't just in Egypt, but in Central America, Southeast Asia, and even Greece, academics say, look, that's just primitive structural evolution. But there's another side to this argument, which is kind of backed up by modern thinking on this, saying if skyscrapers had popped up all over the world today, you wouldn't call that a coincidence, would you? You would say, look, there is a knowledge being accumulated here. We now understand how to build these structures. There's a reason for building these structures. Other people accept that. They learn how to do it, and they do it. You don't just sort of stumble upon building a skyscraper. And then when you get into thinking about these big polygonal stone walls. So we're used to being told about this on Ancient Aliens, but you'd think of Peru, you'd think of Göbekli Tepe, you'd think of those places where they show you these walls which are so precisely built you can't get a piece of paper in between them, and they were built years before concrete and all of that. But they have now been proved to exist in Greece, Italy, Turkey, Japan, Easter Island. How did all of these civilizations figure out at the same time, using the same techniques, how to build such intricate, difficult structures? And their point is, so similarly. And it doesn't stop there, because there are stone sarcophagi from ancient Japan and Egypt. They look eerily alike, and statues from Easter Island, Peru, Turkey, Indonesia, all with similar hand positions and faces. And this was mentioned on another podcast a few weeks ago, which I've only just found, but it's nothing, completely different point. But figures holding handbags in stone carvings from 1200-year-old Göbekli Tepe in Turkey are also represented in the Olmec culture in Mesopotamia. So there's these handbags. So you get all of these shared symbologies, and this includes tridents. It includes specific-looking gods with multi-headed snakes battling them. They're all popping up in Sumerian, Greek, Hindu, all of these things.
We touched on this. It's interesting because you said last week that bits of what you were working on did tie into the episode I did of we were placed here as aliens millions of years ago. That last week's episode touches on some of those same themes, doesn't it? The similarities between culture and buildings and architecture and, similar thing,
What if there was a civilization on Mars that was building all of this sort of what looks to us from afar, this face and the pyramid, like sort of pseudo ancient Egyptian architecture, but that is just their culture. That's what they build. Some of them get displaced to Earth. They bring those ideas with them, spreading around the globe. Their ancestors on Mars are gone, and then maybe that alien civilization that wiped them out mostly and repatriated some of them. Maybe that's when they injected the DNA. Maybe that's when they started doing the manipulation on us as a species.
Yes, no, I was seeing how that tied in because if we look at last week's episode, you could argue that the Martians got fed up with their criminals and dumped them on Earth, but then you wouldn't have this ongoing hybridization, would you? So it makes sense it would have to be another third-party alien species. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
And there might even be some evidence that they brought their knowledge of nukes with them, whether they were their nukes, whether they were somebody else's. I mean, this isn't new to us. We've roughly talked about this in the past, but just to remind you, because it fits in with this story, in ancient India, there's a massive epic called the Mahabharata. And it has some folks convinced that nuclear wars happened sort of 8 to 12,000 years ago because the text describes an epic battle with weapons that sound suspiciously high-tech. So some of the descriptions point to a single projectile charged with all the power in the universe, unleashing a blast brighter than 1,000 suns. That's the direct translation here. And the text talks about charred bodies, hair, nails falling out, food being poisoned, and soldiers diving into rivers to wash off some kind of deadly residue. If that doesn't sound like a nuclear attack, I don't know what does. And so when you start mixing in these stories, which, like, people just, like, it's easy to put that down as just, oh, well, that's just a fanciful, like, idea that's been developed off a legend. And you can do that, and you can, but if there's at some point you do have to start looking and going, well, why does Mars have those isotopes? Why do we describe weapons like that? Why do all of these places on Earth have similar architecture? There is something here that isn't really, it's adding up and people don't want to talk about it.
I guess there is another way of looking at why those isotopes and those residues from nuclear explosions could be there on Mars. This is a bit out there as well. It could be something we as humans have done. Again, tests in the Martian atmosphere of our nuclear weapons. I wouldn't put it past us to do that. May not be possible to get them up there and transport them to there, but it's a possibility.
It is a possibility. Yeah. But it's also like not beyond the realms that even if the Mars thing isn't real, like Eric von Daniken has pointed out, so that Oklo natural nuclear reactor is if our ancestors had got themselves together, they might have figured out what was going on, and maybe tried to build a nuke out of that. Now, there'll be 99.99% of you will be shouting at me, going, "That isn't how nukes work, Ben." I know it isn't, but maybe they got an idea for it. Maybe there was something in that was built upon by, I don't know, a visitor, something like that. I'm beginning to sound suspiciously Ancient Aliens here. But the whole thing here, the reason that this isn't an episode of Ancient Aliens is because it is built on this scientific paper, which has only been out less than a year now, I think. And it's the first time I've seen anyone with a email address that ends in harvard.edu say...
Hey, there could be nukes
Mars was the victim of a nuking, and that really caused a. You know those moments when you kind of stop and you think, "Blimey, the scales really are falling from people's eyes at the moment," and I wonder whether as we get more and more used to using AI, and it's very good at assembling data from vast data sets and from disparate pieces of data as well. I wonder whether at the moment when people are kind of dismissing this stuff, that an AI will be able to pull it together and actually present some of the evidence and kind of either go, yeah, you're right, there was an ancient nuke there, or no, it's absolutely impossible. What you were missing is this, and this. And there's probably something else that we don't know at the moment, which comes into force. So there might be something that travels through the universe. Like, we don't know what a Oumuamua is, for example. Maybe that brings some kind of new exotic material that could cause these sorts of spikes to happen if collide with a planet, you know? Yeah. I don't know. But it's a fascinating idea, and it really does, you know, the Mars is called the planet of war. Why would that be? Why would it be called that?
Interesting. I thought that. Yeah.
That is if that isn't an ancient sort of callback in our own memory DNA, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was my high horse. I'm just climbing down off it now because this got me really riled up and sort of annoyed that people. I was really annoyed to read that about NASA. I'm not a NASA basher by any means, but like. You know, come on, evidence is evidence. You have to go with the evidence. You have to go with the science, whatever it tells you.
I'm really interested in that concept as well of recolonization from Mars to Earth, because actually, if you go with this narrative, doesn't have to be Mars was instantly destroyed by its nuclear explosion. So let's follow a story arc of Martian natives develop nuclear technology, develop nuclear weapons, either the nuclear technology in a Chernobyl way or a nuclear war, you know, destroys large parts of the planet. They realise it was going to end in the ultimate destruction of the planet or the loss of their atmosphere. And the plan goes, well, we'll relocate some people at least to Earth. If you think of it in that light, and where we are technologically wise, which, you know, you could argue is not very advanced, but we're planning human missions to Mars. So technology advancement on Mars at the time, if you go with the narrative, wouldn't need to be that much more advanced than we are now, would it?
No, not really. No. I mean, the problems might be in terms of, would a creature that had evolved on Mars be suitable for life on Earth? And that goes into something that you were talking about the other episode. Like, is the gravity wrong or whatever? I mean, I didn't put too much stay in that idea that humans aren't from here, but maybe there is something in it. Maybe that's why we needed the DNA to be inserted in us. I don't know.
Well, maybe the DNA is a complete red herring in that story. Do you know what I mean? If it was in a last desperate attempt before the planet totally runs out of atmosphere, Mars, and destroys itself, we manage to get a handful of people to Earth to see if they can survive. Maybe the DNA is a complete red herring in that scenario, and the hybridization. Maybe it's just that we did originate on Mars, and as that book last week went into, this Earth is not quite our perfect environment. It's close enough, but it's not perfect.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in this case, I don't think the truth is out there. The truth is gradually going to dribble its way in over the next 500 years, I think.
It'd be interesting to see whether those areas that you're talking about get explored. Because I get in a way that NASA might go, this face on Mars thing, it's just, whatever, optical illusion, pareidolia. We're not interested in that region. So, we're not going to put any more resources into it. But if you've got scientific evidence of these, I don't know what you'd call them, nuclear explosion, trace elements, whatever you'd like to call them, you think that would be a good enough reason to go back and explore that region in more detail?
Yeah, indeed, you would.
Yeah.
You would. The mystery goes on. I would encourage you to go and buy that book, everybody. Anything by Richard Hoagland is interesting. It's definitely, I think, you get more out of it if you just suspend your disbelief and go with being on the believer's side for a bit.
Yeah, it's a good way to read. I like reading them twice, once in that mode and once in a skeptical mode.
Yeah. I mean, he's not tinfoil hattish. It's just it's like you sort of have to. It's more fascinating if you go with the potential, but yeah, it's all rather fun.
The nukes on Mars.
There's the David Bowie reference to the episode. We haven't had a 70s dance troupe episode reference this episode.
No, I'm not sure how we can get Legs and Co into this.
I was actually thinking of the Diddy Men, but
Right, okay.
that's well off target.
Yeah, are they from Mars? Probably not.
I don't know. I don't know. Would you...
We managed to get Pam Ayres in the other week, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I wish I'd looked after my teeth. Maybe we'll do a Pam Ayres...
I wish I'd looked after me nukes.
We could do a Pam Ayres Christmas special.
Yeah.
We'll blend quantum mechanics, the paranormal, and a moderately successful 1980s poet from the West Country.
It's a winning combination.
I can't see anything wrong with it.
We could put that as our podcast description, couldn't we? Brilliant. Okay, well, that was fascinating. A lot to think about there. I love those kind of episodes because it's just you can... I think we've said a few times, the kind of sci-fi scriptwriter in you goes, "Oh, I can have fun with that."
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? I'll tell you the other thing that's interesting about this is if you think about it. We were talking about War of the Worlds before, and how that concept of life or invasion or something coming from Mars became really credible and popular in a sci-fi way. And then it became a little bit ridiculous when we found out more about Mars, but it seems to be coming back around again.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, you remember the episode we did about the moon coverage, the yellow journalism, and the sexy bat people. I miss the sexy bat people. They'll come back. They'll come back. Anyway, TQM patreon.com/TQM pod is where you want to be for all the extra stuff.
Also, go check out, we've got our Quantum Mechanics merchandise and T-shirt store. Links will be in the show notes.
Yes.
You can go to our social.
They're very much, they're nicer quality than you might imagine.
Well, and also the one we did a funny one that's based on 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that's doing very well.
Yeah, that's very nice. So do all that. And your free hobby option is if you do shave your dog, and it's good for the dog, but just do it safely, people, and get a professional. But my dog is much happier after being shaved.
Cool. Well, talking of T-shirts, next week we're going paranormal shopping.
We're SHOPPING.
We're shopping. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?